Have you ever heard the sound of freedom? Have you ever heard the sound of freedom?
You are listening to The Flip Side with Noah Filipiak, connecting the reality of the gospel to the grit of life. You can support the podcast at patreon.com/Noah Filipiak or at noahfilipiak.com/give.
What's up, world? Small, very small, little tiny part of the world. Welcome to episode 7 of the Flip Side podcast. And today's going to be a bit different. Rather than my usual ridiculousness of an introduction that I normally do, we have a guest today. And so we're going to jump right into the guest interview. And then after the interview is done, I'll get into the ridiculousness. I'm also going to do the mailbag at that time, as well as Noah's rant. So first thing I want to do is introduce you to my guest. So on the other line, I suppose, or on the line is Matthew Thornton. And Matthew, what's up, Matthew? Yeah, say hey. I'm not good at this.
How's it going?
Going well. Yeah, we had some technical difficulties. Yep. We're ready to roll now. And so just so listeners know, Matthew and I both have little kids taking naps right now as we speak. So we'll see how this goes. This will be exciting. Matthew, how old is your little one taking her nap, I think you said?
Yeah, my daughter just turned 3 2 weeks ago.
Nice. Okay. So my daughter turns 2 in June. Yeah, so that's pretty awesome. So here's the story of Matthew and I. We met back in probably 6th grade, I think, something like that. Yeah. My family started going. Matthew's dad is a pastor, and my family started going to their church when I was in about 6th grade, and we went there for about 2 years. I think 6th and 7th grade, somewhere around there. I have a picture still. I keep this like memory box from my life, and Matthew and I went to junior high camp together, and I remember this girl that I liked there, and I actually held her hand at the fire the last night. That was a big step for me at the time. Yeah, man. So I still have that picture somewhere. I may try to dig it up. If I can find it, I will post it in these notes of the the picture they take of the whole group.
The big one?
Yeah, the big one. And me and you are next to each other. I've got my Ohio University hat on because my brother was a freshman at the time, and I thought that was like super cool. And then the girl is like right next to me in the picture. So that was pretty big moment we shared together.
Yeah, I remember that week.
Yeah, man. So soon after that, my family started going to a different church, just kind of what, adults do. I was kind of out of the loop, and but Matthew and I went to the same junior high and then the same high school, and so we knew each other all through our high school years and that sort of thing. But we began to take divergent paths as far as came to life and lifestyle and faith and things like that. And so a couple of weeks ago, Matthew added me on Facebook as a friend, and we haven't talked since high school. We're both pretty old now. We hate to admit it, but we're looking at 40 here pretty soon. And so, it's been a long time. We both live out of state now. And so I saw Matthew's profile picture, and honestly, I don't know how you'll take this, but I was kind of surprised to see, like, you look like, I think your wife was in the picture and kids in the picture or something like that. And I was like, wow, I didn't exactly expect that, maybe not kind of thing. And so, but I was happy.
It surprises a lot of people.
And so I was happy to add you as a friend. And then I did what I'm sure nobody else listening has ever done, Facebook stalking. I'm sure I'm the only one who's ever done that. And I was stalking your pictures, and as I did that, I saw, man, Matthew is leading worship, and I saw a picture of you and one of your kids, and there's like a cross in the picture, like a craft. They had kind of the classic Sunday school craft, and I saw a post from your dad. I remember your dad well, being my pastor for those 2 years, and your dad was saying how, his sons were walking with the Lord and all these sorts of things. And I was just like, wow, like this is awesome. And so also one more thing, I was very impressed with your diversity of hairdos that I saw in your photos. So I need to say that. And before Before I turn it over to you, Matthew, I got to share this one story. So we've obviously prepped for this a little bit, and I've asked Matthew to just kind of share his story, and I want to kind of let him take the lead on that rather than me, share things that he may or may not be comfortable with me sharing. But I will let listeners know that in high school, you had the most magnificent white man afro that I've ever seen in my life. And we were in chemistry class together in 11th grade. And I remember you telling me that you would sleep in class sometimes, and the fro would cover your eyes, and you told me that was like that's how you made it work, was like the fro would cover your eyes, and so the teacher didn't know you were sleeping. So I saw a bald head on your profile. I saw the look you have now, and I also saw the long hair kind of tied in the back. So I was impressed, and wanted to give a shout out to all those hairdos.
Yeah. That's what I got. I'd change it up.
I love it, man. Well, dude, thank you so much for doing this. And I'm just going to turn it over to you. If you want to just kind of start with your story, and then I'll follow up with some questions from there. But I'm wondering if you'd start even from when you were a kid. And a lot of people take it for granted, like being a pastor's kid is a little bit different as far as your experience with faith and those sorts of things. So maybe just start out. What was it like being a pastor's kid, and did you find faith as a child, and then kind of take it from there until where you are today?
Yeah. So I'm the youngest of three boys. My dad was a preacher from the time he was in college in the 70s until he retired from ministry few years ago, and actually started preaching again, filling in at a church recently. So he hasn't really retired. So when I was born, my parents were in a ministry in North Carolina, and most of my dad's ministries were in the South, basically North Carolina, Virginia, small town, North Carolina. Grew up heavily immersed in church. And I mean, looking back on it, I love it. I mean, I love that I got that experience of knowing all the ins and outs of not just the building, but like the way church works. I mean, I learned stuff that is helpful now, where I am in life. I believed in God. I mean, I became a Christian, committed my life, and got baptized when I was 7, which was really young. And then at that time, it was a few years later, over the course of the next few years, life started to get different. I mean, started to grow up more. My dad lost the ministry where he was and was hurt pretty bad in that. And a lot of this stuff, I didn't realize it at the time. Like, I remember some of these feelings and what I thought about the situations, but they had a big impact on me in my direction in life, I think, because I was angry at people at church. Because like most of it was the elder stuff. And my parents held back some things, but we also knew some things about the situations that were happening. And then that church kind of split, and they started another one, and then that one wasn't really working out, so they let my dad go from that. And I was like, I remember saying to my parents at one point, that church, you can't have a church without a preacher. That's not going to work out. And of course, it didn't work out. I don't know why they didn't just fold at that point, but they tried to continue to have church without a preacher, which was different. I mean, it can work, but it's difficult.
Yeah. And
at that point, my dad was at a hard time in his life where he had to look elsewhere or in different places if he was going to stay in ministry. And we ended up moving from North Carolina to Ohio. I was 10. And at that point, I had seen my parents get hurt in church. And I had developed friendships for the first time that were like good friends. And I didn't want to move. So when we moved to Ohio, I moved here as kind of an angry, rebellious kid at 10 years old. I ended up going to a school where that year there were 2 other kids that were new. All 3 of us were larger than everyone else in the grade. All 3 of us were kind of outsiders, being new. And all 3 of us listened to this up and coming music called rap. So I fell in with those kids, and that's who my friends became when we moved to Ohio. And I think that's where my path started to get dark. Because I wanted to have friends again. I wanted to fit in. Along the course, I believed in God the whole time. At some point, I got to a place where I said, I want to believe in God, and I don't want to be like the church or like Christians.
Yeah.
Part of it was me thinking I wanted to be cool. And I thought Christians weren't cool, which turns out I'm not cool now, so it doesn't really matter. And then also part of it was that I said I can love people without being a part of that group. And I wanted to do my own thing. So started hanging out with them around, also at the age of 10, right before we moved to Ohio. I got a guitar. Someone gave me a guitar, and I stuck with that. So by the time we got into beginning of 7th grade, I had learned how to play the guitar, had developed a desire to basically want to be a rock star, and made some new friends that wanted to do the same, and started to fall into a lifestyle of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So, when I moved to Ohio at the age of 10, started to, with those friends that I made, those when I had my first use of tobacco, alcohol, and smoked marijuana for the first time when I was 10 years old. Then once we got into junior high, beginning of 7th grade, I was already at a point where I was regularly using marijuana. And I smoked cigarettes to cover up the smell of weed. So, and at that point, you saw me, I was in church.
Yeah.
Every time I had to be at church, I was in church. So there was a high expectation on me by my parents, and not just my parents. Also got hurt over junior high and high school because of the expectation that I felt other church leaders put on me. Especially some that I like. One of the guys that was in ministry there, he knew that I was doing drugs when he met me, and he could have had it because he came from a similar background. He could have had an impact, and instead he pushed me away because of that. So. And he and I struggled for a few years and still have some contact. But it's back to, okay, so junior high. I'm at a point where I'm doing drugs. I'm playing rock and roll music. When I say doing drugs, it was mostly weed and drinking, and not drinking a whole lot, but I drank when I got my hands on stuff. And, when I say sex, like I wasn't having sex, but I was trying to. I was a little kid who was immature. And then getting into high school, that stuff did start to happen. So, and then the drugs expanded, started to try other stuff. I never got real heavy into a lot of other drugs, but I did a lot of hallucinogenic things. And just thought I was living it up. I thought it was like I partied hard. I thought I was good at it, and I was proud of that at the time. But also in the meantime, wasn't doing anything in high school that you should be doing in high school, like schoolwork. Like you said, I would sleep in chemistry class. Actually, in that class, I remember thinking, how did I get in this class? There's a lot of really smart people in this class. I probably don't fit in here. So just barely skated through high school, wanting to do my own thing, and then had a relationship with a girl not work out the way I wanted it to, and got hurt from that, and just started to get depressed around that towards the end of high school, which of course meant I turned to drugs and alcohol more to help me with my depression. And then it was the night before I went to move out. I was going to move to Columbus with my band at 18 years old after high school. And my brother who's right above me took a similar path that I took. And he was going to be moving to Columbus with my band. We did a lot of partying together. I should have asked him if I could share that. Um,
We
so
can
he's also
honestly, we can edit that out
okay.
if we don't get his permission, we can totally ask him. Yeah,
I'm sure he's good with it. He's changed a lot too.
yeah.
So, and
That I can interview him next on the next
okay,
episode.
I'll let him know.
Because
He's,
that's awesome to hear though. I remember your brother, and I saw good pictures and good stories and stuff of him on your dad's page, and I was like, man, praise God. So keep going.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fantastic.
yeah, he's got a different story, but it's a good one. So,
Yeah.
so around that time, 18 years old, something happened. Basically, like I said, I always believed in God through all of the stupid stuff I did in high school. I just thought I could believe in God and not be a Christian and be okay. Like if I cared about people, I tricked myself into thinking that I was cared about people enough.
Yeah.
Because like I tried not to be a bad person. I just wanted to party like that. Like, so around 18, right before we moved out, actually, basically my brother and I were doing drugs one night, and something happened, and we both ended up at the end of that whole ordeal, knowing that our lives were meant for more than that. Our lives were meant for just going out and getting wasted, and that we were called to be Christians. That we always knew we were supposed to be Christians, and that we couldn't waste time anymore, that we were supposed to serve God. So that's the point when I knew, without a doubt, my life is meant for God. And then I moved to Columbus with my band that I party with all the time. So that's when I really started to go down a dark path, really started to get depressed. I mean, that next year, 19 and 20 were the hardest years of my life. Ended up, of course, broke up the band because of my darkness in my life. Moved out of my parents' house. Like I said, I didn't drink a whole lot before, but once I moved out and lived on Ohio State campus, I developed the beginning of an alcohol problem, which a couple years later turned into a full-blown alcohol problem. And then just started to, like, everything started to fall apart at that point, like, so I told you I had a relationship fall apart, had a band fall apart, started to lose friends. I mean, my bandmates were like brothers to me at that time. And I just kind of said, screw you to all of them. Like, because, and it was like weird because I tried to do it in a way where cause I said, this life that you're living doesn't matter. Like, you need God, but at the same time I was living the same life. So I was like depressed and trying to say, like, and I tried to convince myself in ways over the next few years that my friends needed me in their life because I was the only person that would talk to them about God. But I was so depressed at the time, I got to a point where literally no one respected me. Cause I just, I drowned my depression in alcohol. I moved back to Troy, around 20, was working construction and developed full-blown alcoholism at that point. I mean, daily consumption of at least 12 beers a day for a long time. And then got charged with a DUI, and things started to really hit rock bottom. Around this time, my parents, which my dad, while we lived in Troy, my dad had a successful ministry. And also over the time that this was happening, my parents were not oblivious the whole time to what was happening with me and with my brother. And they, I mean, I remember my dad when I was little thinking he's just like a really strict Christian preacher. But then as I got older, and when I first started to get in trouble, yeah, he was strict. And he was always strict, but I started to see as I didn't learn the way I was supposed to, his love for me and the way he dealt with me changed and grew. And I really respect my parents because I know a a lot of people in similar situations would have disowned their children, and they didn't. They never did. They always loved me, but they also couldn't just put their life on hold. And they had a successful ministry in Troy and left that ministry to start a church. They started a church. It's been 15 or 16 years ago, around the time that I was 20, 21, in Virginia. And I had already received a DUI before they moved. And then right before they were starting the church, like a month before, I got in trouble with the law again. I was basically going to go back to jail. I had already served a little bit of time. I was going to go to jail. And I was on a path where if something didn't drastically change, I was going to end up homeless or dead. I mean, that's how I saw my life was, this is the turning point where if I don't stop it, I'm going to die from this. And I was talking to my parents about it, and my dad said, "We want you to come back to us. We want you to live with us." And I'm an adult. I mean, I'm 21 years old at that point. My parents drove from Virginia to my court date, appeared in court with me. I think the judge might have known my dad or something. He didn't explain anything, but after the sentence was given, my dad said, "Excuse me, can I interrupt?" And said, "We'd like to have him released to us in Virginia." And the judge dropped dropped the sentence, made me pay the fines, and said, "Go."
Wow.
So I got real lucky. And I just left everything, left all my stuff, left my life, left my friends. And I had to, honestly. I mean, it's like Jesus said, if your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out, like, I mean, I had to completely cut ties. And I realized, looking back on it, and I mean, I realized pretty soon after that I had no effect on the people that I thought I was needing to stay for. And that my better effect was even to not really have a relationship with them that much, for them to see me change. That had more of an effect, or has more of an effect, than for me to think I can stay in their life and be a bad person. So be a bad example of Christ, especially. Right. So, and I was not wanting to go back to the church still. I mean, I had basically through high school and I was always made to go to church, had to do that stuff. But when I got to the point where I didn't have to go, and I was all so dark in my depression, I said, I didn't want to go, cause I tried going to church one time with my brother, he turned his life around a little sooner than me and moved to Cincinnati to go to Cincinnati Christian University.
Oh, okay.
I went to Cincinnati at one point to visit him and tried to go to church with him, and had to leave a few minutes into it, and I just went outside and cried the whole time. It's weird. My wife and I ended up working at that church later in life. So, so I went to Virginia to get my life straightened out, basically sober up. That was my goal, was just to sober up, to not die. And it was a few weeks before the church was getting ready to start there. And they were looking for a bass player for the band. And I begrudgingly or reluctantly said to my parents, "I'll help you guys out. I'll do something to help you out. You're helping me out. You're letting me get clean here. I'll play bass there." So, started to play bass in the band just to help out, and pretty quickly noticed something different about the church, about the people. Most of the people a lot of the people, probably close to half of the people who went to that church were new Christians, and at least they were like infants, maybe been Christians for a year or less, and everybody I saw was excited to be at church. And I grew up, like I said, in North Carolina at a small country church, and then also just at an established older church, and it was a different feel. I'd never seen a church where people were like, everyone was excited. And I liked that. And I got to see people that were what I would consider at that time real. Before that, I would have thought like everybody put on a mask. I mean, what I looked like in high school. I wanted to offend people with my image a lot. I wore weird stuff, because because I was weird, like, and I thought if I can't be weird at church, like I wanted to be myself, and I saw people being themselves at church. And I was accepted as a weirdo at church, and got close to some of the people in the band and got involved in a small group there. Basically was starting to know that I wanted to give my music to God, because I had always been in bands and played the guitar, and that was the only thing that I ever really, I mean, the drugs and the partying was fun, but my plan was basically I was going to do music my whole life, So, and started to understand that I wanted to give my music to God around 22, and was involved in serving there. And the worship minister, unfortunately, was let go quickly on a Saturday night for some pretty horrible stuff about 6 months into that church plant.
Gotcha.
Whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was asked that night, hey, can you help us out and fill in the next morning? And basically I've been leading worship since then. Wow. So I jumped in the next morning. I'd always been a front man of the bands that I was in growing up. I knew how to sing. Started doing that, and it felt right. And I wanted to keep doing that. Because at that point I wanted to live for God, like I had wanted to live for God for years leading up to that. I just wasn't. And it was like, I was finally doing something for God. I was finally doing something in the church. I was finally clean. Like, I felt like this is the right path I should be on, So I wanted to continue down that path. And after 6 months of filling in as the worship leader there, decided to go to Cincinnati Christian University for worship ministry. So, ended up moving there, getting involved in the worship program. I was a 23-year-old freshman living off campus, working, and also I hadn't been on my own since I moved back in with my parents, and honestly started to fall back into some of those old habits. Drinking is acceptable within the church in certain communities, and I started to drink again. So I didn't finish my degree. I was involved in worship ministry stuff the whole time. Met my wife there. We sat next to each other in choir. She was graduating. So I was a freshman. She was a senior. We started dating, like, I think right after she graduated or right before she graduated. Yeah, it was right before. And we weren't going to church at that time. And I wanted to possibly go back and finish my degree, but we started going to church when we were dating. And by the time I would have gone back to school, she was working at that church. We had been going there for a few weeks, and stayed after for free food one time. And we're talking to the senior minister, and he asked her what her degree was in, and it matched up perfectly with the need for the assistant to the worship minister. So, and they were multi-site church, several services, and the worship minister also needed people to fill in holes in the band and worship leading. So my wife was the person in charge of scheduling that stuff. So got involved with the ministry there, and really just, so like I said, I started drinking again and I had problems, but at that point I was not going to let my problems take back over my life. I've been sober for several years. I had a while where I thought I could still drink, and still be a Christian, and maybe for some people it works. It doesn't for me. And honestly, I don't even think really for people it works. I think even a couple beers, if you're good with that, I think it could cause a problem for someone like me, you know?
Yeah.
So, and if you take the alcohol, out of the drinks, nobody would drink them. People drink it for the effect of the alcohol.
Right.
So, we're better to have a clean mind, sober mind. So that's my opinion on that. Anyways, so, we spent a while in ministry at that church and got heavily involved with that program. The worship minister ended up resigning at one point, and I took over as an interim worship minister. I didn't finish my degree, but I continued in worship ministry. It's been 15 years, and I've been involved in some capacity almost the entire time. I ended up after that church becoming a worship director at a church. I got hurt at the church when my wife and I first started getting involved by some people, and then I got majorly burned as the worship director at that church. My wife and I had a baby, like a newborn baby, and no income, and because of that situation. So it took a while to really recover from that. We ended up moving to Dallas, where God opened up a door and gave her a job in an awesome church in Dallas. And then now just found the right church for me to serve, and we both are involved in ministry together. I'm a interim worship minister there, or worship leader there as well. It's been a long road.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my story basically.
Man, I appreciate you sharing that, man. I mean, it's amazing to think about. For one, it's weird that, you know, I'm 36. I assume you're right thereabouts as well. It's weird to think that it's like we were 18 when we graduated high school, and it's double that. Like we're the same amount of time as like we were alive when we graduated. That's how long it's been till now, and I mean, it's surreal. And I mean, I'm sure people who are in their 50s and 60s or older would say, "Oh, don't act like you're old," you know. And I get that, but it is surreal, man. I mean, it's surreal in an amazing way to hear your story and hear what God has done. It's also surreal to think about, like, you know, there's been a few people from our graduating class that have passed away, and you know, you see it around like reunion time. People were talking about that on Facebook and things like that. I mean, life is real, and like it's just one of those. It's sobering. It can be sobering to think about, you know, some of these real sort of things. And what I'm wondering is, as you look back on your story and who you are today versus who you were in high school, if you could give advice to yourself back then, if you could go back in time, like the 36-year-old Matthew talked to the teenager Matthew, what kind of things would you try to tell yourself?
The little things matter. Like I said, I didn't do schoolwork when I was in school. Like, it's part of it being such a long road for me is that there's still effects that I struggle with, because not only did I have alcohol and drug problems, but I also didn't learn when I should have been learning. So you're a kid, and you're at a time of life where you should be having fun and enjoying your friendships and stuff, but you also are getting ready to be an adult. So get ready to be an adult. Pay attention, do your best, because it's going to make life easier. And life gets real after high school. I mean, if you're not ready for it, it gets really hard. Yeah. So, and I thought I was awesome in high school. And then right out of high school, I was like, hey, I'm not awesome. Like, I'm kind of a failure. So
I don't mean to laugh at the second part. I'm laughing at the first part because, you know, it's funny. Like, I mean, I think about high school a lot. Because I was somewhat insecure in high school, where like my security was sort of in my Christian friends, like the friends I went to church with and were following Jesus. And like at school, I was friends with the popular kids, but I wasn't like because I wasn't partying, I wasn't doing those things, and so therefore, like, you know, I was kind of on the outside fringe. And I look back and I remember, you know, you and your group of friends. And like, you guys were cool. I mean, you were kind of like I don't know, now I would call it like the stoner crowd. I don't think back then I was probably a little naive.
We were the stoner crowd.
Yeah, but like you were the cool stoner crowd. Like you were, and so there would have been a lot of security, I think, in that for you and for your friends and those sorts of things. It's funny to fast forward to when you're like, we're all almost 40 now, and none of that stuff, like, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't mean anything.
Honestly, it meant nothing. Like right after high school, like as soon as you get out of high school, it starts to mean nothing, like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and now, yeah, it really means nothing now it's just, like I said, it was setbacks, like
Right.
it's really slowed down life. And I got to work hard, to make up for it. And it's still hard because of it. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like part of my brain doesn't work the way it's supposed to because of the drug use. Also, my
Mm-hmm.
brain doesn't work the way it's supposed to because I didn't pay attention in math, any
Yeah.
math class,
Yeah.
like, so, that's one thing I would share. There was something else. I mean, honestly, the most important thing is a relationship with God.
Yeah.
Um, Especially if he calls you, don't waste time. I mean, like, turn from your old life, run towards him. I mean, that's, like I said, I've been hurt. I watched my parents get hurt. I've been hurt in ministry. That doesn't stop me from pursuing him.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that I know from the Christian university when I was there, and they went to ministry, they got hurt, and they left ministry. But God doesn't change. So, I mean, if I've committed myself to serve him and to serve his body, no matter what happens, I'm going to continue to do that. So,
If you could sit down, whether it was with yourself in those days, in the dark days, either the dark days or in you kind of had the party days in high school where things were good, and then the dark
yeah,
days afterwards. Either one of those. I'm thinking of people who are in that situation now, and honestly, for all I know, there's some of our friends from high school that are listening to this just via Facebook, and they see your name and my name, and are like, "Oh, what are those two guys doing talking to each other?"
yeah,
And I'm hoping might be listening. And I pray for friends of mine from high school still, and friends that I see on Facebook still and stuff like that. And I guess I'm wondering, like, what you would say. Let's say a friend from high school was listening, and if they're not, just to, like, anyone who's not a believer, who thinks that, like, a life away from Jesus is worth it or better, or not, I don't want to say better, but there's just I typically talk about a relationship with Christ, like there's just like this deep fulfillment there, and there's a satisfaction there that you're never going to get from some of those things that you experienced. And frankly, I've experienced my own sin struggles and sin story, and I talk about that in Beyond the Battle, and overcoming pornography and addictions and things like that. But I think there's this big swath of society that sort of feels like, whether they're 16 or they're 36, and it's to scale, or they're in the middle of college or whatever, but that the party lifestyle, no matter how it's moderated, and I'll be honest with you, without naming anybody particular, my wife is a school teacher, and she's worked in multiple districts, so I can say this hopefully without incriminating any specific district, but like school teachers, for example, they drink a lot. I don't know what else is going on, but like it's this party lifestyle, and there's not room for like a relationship with Jesus. Jesus is kind of seen as this, I don't know, maybe a trinket, or maybe this, whatever it might be. But I feel like you've experienced both paths, and you've experienced life on your own, and you've experienced life with Jesus. What would you say to somebody who's not experiencing life with Jesus, and they still think that the lifestyle that they're living is going to be worth it in the end?
I mean, I would basically, from my experience, I know it's not fulfilling. I mean, it's this endless cycle of trying to fill that hole, and it doesn't. And I would say, even on the bad days with Jesus, it's fulfilling.
Yeah.
Like, life isn't easy because I'm a Christian, but it's good. And that there's hope, when you turn towards God, and that you have that,
Yeah.
you don't have to fight for it. You don't have to try and struggle to fill that hole in your life. That God does that. So, and it's real.
Yeah,
So,
I completely agree, and I not that one is better or worse. It's not like keeping score or anything, but I never had a season where I was like fully in rebellion against God, but I've had depression. I've had, which I talk openly about. I've had ups and downs. I've had struggles. I almost got a divorce in my marriage, addictions of pornography, and I can say that I think what you said is very true. That following Jesus is not always going to make everything easy, but man, it is good. Like, it is the solid rock beneath you, and I honestly don't know how people live without that solid rock beneath them, because on my worst days and worst seasons, that solid rock is still there. And it's not just like a figment of my imagination. It's like, it's a real person and a real presence. And like we just had Easter recently, and every Easter comes around, and I always just think, no matter what I'm going through in life, that tomb is still empty. Like, Jesus resurrected from the dead. He's still victorious, and I'm on his team. And I just throw that out there as an invitation to anybody they don't have solid rock under them, and maybe they still think what they have under them is going to be that for them, and just to say, like, my experience with Jesus is real, and like, it is, it's better. I mean, not better like better, but better like better. Like, it's deep. It's like there's this deep depth to it that I just would be so lost without in my life, and I long for friends from high school and others to, I don't know, just to hear that invitation from the Lord that, like, he loves them, and that we all like fallen short, and we've all messed up, and he makes up the difference. Like, we don't have to do it. He does it. He died on the cross, rose from the dead, end of story. We're his kids if we accept that gift. And like, man, I mean, life is so freaking hard. Like, I don't know how anybody can like go through the struggles of life without having like someone outside of themselves that is getting them through it and saving them. And so anyway, I'm done preaching, but that's just kind of my heart. And it's just so awesome to hear like God never gave up on you. And I think that's the story for so many people. Like, God hasn't given up on them. He's just waiting for them to like turn, kind of like the prodigal son. He's just waiting. Yeah.
He's waiting to welcome them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. Yeah. Prodigal son is Luke 15. If anyone listening, that's off the top of my head. Whenever I say a reference on live, like not live, but I'm not going back to edit. My listeners know that I don't edit unless I have to. So I always have this fear. I'm like, I probably just said the wrong reference. So I'm pretty sure it's Luke 15. I'm going to look it up real quick.
I think it is.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, that whole chapter, I'd encourage anybody to read. That's listening. But so I had a question that I wanted to ask. It's sort of it's kind of relevant. It's sort of irrelevant.
Okay.
When you were in high school, we were in high school together, like, and you were living your life and things were going well, what did you think of somebody like me? Not me specifically, like, what did you think of Noah, but what did you think of someone like me who was your age and in high school and was following Jesus? And I don't know if there were people like that at your church still. I assume there were some, like, people your age who were following Jesus. If you can even remember, like, what did you think of somebody that was following Jesus during that season of your life, specifically someone your age?
I mean, I guess the word would be corny.
Yeah.
You know, like, I kind of thought it was corny. But I think a lot of that was like the pop culture representation of Christians, and I just lumped everybody who was a devout Christian into that.
Yeah.
I mean, part of what I was excited about when I was started getting involved in worship ministry was that, hey, I can do good music to me that's not corny for God now.
Yeah.
I mean, Martin Luther said, "Why does Satan get all the bad or all the good music?" You know, like,
yeah.
So I thought devout Christians were corny, but like I've said, it's almost as soon as I graduated from high school, I realized being cool and being corny, those things don't matter. Yeah. You know, what's cool is someone that's a man who stands up for what's right and follows their convictions. Like, those are cool things, you know, like, not, oh, I can drink a lot. That's not cool. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny because I look back at my time in high school, and I had insecurities, but I never crossed that line of like, I'm gonna find these insecurities through like a sinful lifestyle to have them filled. And I think
yeah,
for whatever reason, God, I think, chose to save me from that stuff. There were times when like there were girls that I liked, and if they had liked me back, I would have been crossing those lines. And once you start crossing those lines, especially with girls and sexual stuff, like it just, one thing leads to another, to another, to another, and
yeah,
basically at the end of the day, whether it's sex, drugs, alcohol, kind of whatever it might be, you tend to do them all to find that sense of acceptance, to find that sense of like, I want that emptiness inside of me to be made whole, and these friends are there, and these are the things we're doing together to be made whole. And I was given, I can think of two friends of mine that went to my church youth group, different church again than yours. And I was at that church from like 8th grade through graduation. So I made some really good friends there. Some went to different school districts, but two of them specifically went to Troy. And then I had another friend from another church in town, and he went to Troy. And all three friends were like, they were very good athletes, they were respectable. They weren't like super nerds kind of thing.
yeah.
And there was something we had together where like on like Friday nights we would play like Risk, the board game, and play ping pong, in my basement, and or we'd play Bond, on N64, and like that's all I needed. I needed those guys, and we had each other as like, we were okay because we had each other, and at school we had each other, and we had a very deep, real friendship. And I wonder what would have happened to me like if I didn't have those three guys, right? And that sort of sense of security at school where I didn't need to do that other stuff because I already had that kind of need filled. And I kind of say that only to think about, for people who are listening, no matter what age you're at, like just how important that Christian community is. Because I feel like that's what you started experiencing at your parents' church plant. I think it was in Virginia with the band. Like just how like powerful that is, and how I think important it is for Christians to like be intentional about having that in their life, and for us to be that for other people in our lives. Because I think of those three guys. I'll tell you now, some of them probably, Clifton Barth, Dan Griffith, and Mark Caldwell. Yep. Like those three guys, and to this day are all walking with Jesus. And like those three guys, I look back, I'm like, man, they saved me. Like God used them to protect me and save me. And I don't know, there's something to be said for that, where like I was okay to be corny because I was with them, but I don't know if I would have made it. And I think a lot of people don't make it because they're kind of being corny, so to speak, on their own. And I don't think that changes if you're 15, 25, or 35, or 55. I think there's always that pressure to like cave into what the world is doing because you just don't, you want to be accepted and you want to be cool. But in a good church setting, in a healthy church setting, I think that's what the church is supposed to offer people. So,
I mean, I don't think it's possible to. I think you can become a Christian by yourself, but I don't think it's possible to stay on the path without being in community with the body of Christ. I mean, you can't be a Christian in isolation, because we're supposed to be a part of something bigger that has an impact on the world. So and by doing so has an impact on us. Mm-hmm. So
let me close with this question. That got me thinking about one more key thing. Like, so when you met your wife, you guys were at Christian college together. Assume she's already a believer and relatively strong in her faith. And correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I mean, how important was like meeting her as someone who is already following Jesus to your sort of lasting faith as well? Just kind of like the same way that Christian community is important. Dating someone that's a believer versus dating someone that's not a believer, and marrying someone that's following Jesus, and how has that helped you in to kind of stay in your faith and stay sober and all those sorts of things?
So I feel like my wife and I we're a very good match in that. So I grew up in the church, and spent a long time away from it. She became a Christian when she was 18.
Okay.
And basically decided to go to Bible college. She was on track. She's a very smart girl. She was on track to do something in the medical field, probably would have had a big impact with that, and then decided to go to Christian university instead. So she hadn't been a Christian for a long time, but she got she was like, oh, I don't know anything about God. She started going to church when she was 18 and became a Christian. I don't know anything about God. I'm going to learn it all in a short period of time, But she knew a lot, but her faith had room to grow. I had experienced a lot of the church, but my faith had room to grow. So and also like I was rock and roll. She was classical music. We came from two similar yet different backgrounds where we were both kind of baby Christians, but in different ways. So we've helped each other grow a lot in that. She's been good for me, like, cause she was a good kid growing up. And she's helped me with that, but also, I corrupted her a little bit. I showed her some of the stuff that she would have never seen before, but we've been balanced because of that.
Yeah.
And since we met at Bible college, we were committed to serving God. So, I think that's been important, is that no matter what happens, like with the church that I was a part of, where I was a worship director and I got hurt, after that all happened, she still supports me knowing that I'm going to serve God, I could go back into ministry if that's what we chose to do, that's, I guess, does that answer the question? I feel like we're a good balance for each other.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It just got me thinking about, just single guys that I know. I do a fair amount of ministry to single guys with the Beyond the Battle stuff. And I think there's just this, as guys, we like to think like we're strong enough to, like, we can kind of, there's guys who date women who aren't believers, and I think that usually bears a certain type of fruit in their life and their faith, because you look at the Bible, for example, and there's like these stories of whether it's Samson or Solomon or whoever, like you, as a guy, you're going to start, and I think that's what trips up a lot of guys is like, I'm going to be with this girl, and if she's not a believer, obviously you're going to have very different sets of standards and all these sorts of things. I've met a few guys who, like, they really weren't with it with their faith, and God brought like a strong, godly woman into their life that they fell in love with, and praise God, it worked out where like she brought him up to like where she was, and that's kind of like been a big, boost and help in their life. And so I just kind of made that observation as you were telling your story, how different it maybe could have been had you fallen in love with some girl who was like, she was into the party scene and whatever. Yeah. It's like that, just those sorts of decisions, again, back to like little things mattering to what you were saying to your former self, as I asked you. But like, I just think that's a huge thing. And sometimes in the church that can be seen as corny. Like when we're to tell people like, yeah, only date Christians. You're like, well, that sounds really corny. It's like, man, I just see the fruit of it on the other side when guys are dating godly women and then get married to godly women. It's not like your marriage is perfect or anything like that, but there certainly is another level of community there that's keeping you strong. I mean, just, from the, like, not that it's the perfect picture of reality, but like, as I looked at your Facebook kind of profile, and I haven't talked to you in 18 years, and I'm just like, man, like, you have your struggles and stuff, but you can see the like fruit in your life. Like, you can see you got this wife and these kids and church and like this ministry, and just like the joy and the peace that I can see just looking at you, it's real, man. So it's awesome. I praise God for it. I'm so thankful that you were willing to like come on and share this story. It's vulnerable, and to put it out there. And
can I say something with the marriage thing? So
yeah,
it's kind of like what you were saying about, you can't imagine life without the foundation of Christ. Like I agree. I don't know. I can't understand now where I am, how people live without it, like, because it's real. I think marriage is the same thing. Like, marriage without Christ,
Yeah.
like, I don't understand. It's hard enough, like, marriage is
Yes.
hard.
Yeah.
And relationships are hard. But when Christ is the goal of both you and your
Yes.
wife,
Yeah.
it's good. Like, it's what's the point of marriage is that Christ is the center of our marriage. So,
Yes.
yeah, I just want to say it's the same.
Dude.
The same. It's got to be focused on that.
So true. Like, I don't know. I've said this so many times. Like, I don't know how people that don't follow Jesus can stay married, and
Yeah.
a lot of them don't. A lot of them don't stay married, and certainly like Christians getting divorced and stuff as well. But I mean, just marriage is so hard, and to not have. I mean, I officiate a lot of weddings as a pastor, and like, I mean, I tell that to people all the time at weddings, like that having Jesus in your marriage, that's going to get you through it. I mean, that because I don't have to depend on my wife's love for me. Like, if my wife, if it doesn't feel like she's loving me, then I don't have to shut down, because I still have a source of love in my life, and it's Jesus. And it's the same way for her. When she doesn't feel like I'm loving her, she has a source of love in her life, and it's Jesus. And like, man, that's what gets us through. That's how I didn't get a divorce. And I was close. I mean, it was, and I was a pastor, and I was looking at like, man, I was thinking, man, guys like Matthew Thornton had it right in high school. Like, I wasn't naming you, but I'm thinking of like the crowd, like the promiscuous life and just whatever, like the whole crowd was doing. And that's what I was going to go do. I was going to go live that. And that's kind of my story and beyond the battle that I lay out there. And it's great. Like, I was 24, man. I got married when I was 21. And it's just, Satan is very crafty. Like, he can use all kinds of things to tempt us. And like, if Jesus wasn't the foundation of that marriage, of my wife and I's marriage, I mean, oh man, I would have split. I would have split so quick, and she would have too. I mean, I would have been a totally, completely different person, than I am today. So, praise. I say that to give Jesus praise, and I think his fruit is evident in my life and in your life, and it's got his handprint all over it. It's not because of us, it's because of him. And man. So, man, it's awesome. This is great. I'll send any like listener feedback your way if stuff comes up. But I'm just glad to reconnect, man. I mean, it's like, I feel like we were Christian like friends in 7th grade at that camp, I was, and then it wasn't like I was acquaintances with you in high school and stuff, like I was with most people, but I mean, this is just really cool. I just say, like, I love you, brother, and like
we're brothers now. That's the point.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And tell Tim, like, I didn't know Brady that well, because I don't know if I should be saying their names again. Let's see if you get their permission to share the story. But just tell, like, Tim, man, like, same thing. Like, I knew him a little bit better because of football and like being in the same, like, I think 1 or 2 years apart in high school, and like, but to hear his story, like, being back, like walking with Jesus, man, it's just like, it gives me hope, just like as a pastor and as like someone who loves Jesus, that I think everybody we show the love of Christ to and share the gospel with, like, you just never know. You never know 20 years later what God might do in their life. So, man, this is just super exciting.
Yeah. Amen.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, we made it. Our kids are still sleeping. It's amazing. So we better not like push our luck any further. So I'll wrap us up here, man. But thanks, Matthew, so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Man, isn't it super awesome what God has done in Matthew's life? I mean, that's still super fresh for me. I know for Matthew, he's been living this story for many years now, but we just reconnected. That's kind of what's the surreal part about it for me. We just reconnected a couple weeks ago, and to hear all this is just fills me with just so much hope and encouragement, even in ministry, right? I mean, I think one of the most discouraging things in ministry is you share the gospel with people and you have this hope and you know that it's real and true, and people are like, yeah, whatever. Like, sometimes people are just like, yeah, you're corny, that's kind of the word that Matthew used, or they have their reasons for not believing, and they have they just dismiss you, or they accept it. And like Jesus has the parable of the 4 seeds, where they accept it, but then they quickly get choked out, by other things and temptations. And to just know that like God is never done with anybody. Like he's not done with you. If you're listening, he's still calling you to himself. And if you're in ministry and you're struggling and you're discouraged, that like, man, I'm sharing the gospel, or I'm preaching, or I'm ministering, and it just seems like people are rejecting me and they're rejecting Jesus. You just never know. And I'm telling you, listening to Matthew's story, like this stuff isn't made up. Like I think some non-believers just think, oh yeah, Jesus is like a lucky rabbit's foot. It works for you. That's good for you. It's like one of the greatest things that's kept me in my faith through times of doubt is experiencing the miracles that Jesus does in people's lives and in my own life. Like it is a supernatural power of ultimate love, of ultimate grace and forgiveness that makes someone whole. You cannot make that up. It cannot be something that is fabricated, and you can totally hear that and see that in Matthew's story. So that's fantastic. I want to mention the mailbag here right now. I am not going to open the mailbag today just because the interview was about an hour long, and I like to keep these episodes at about an hour. And we did get a lot of email about the last episode on Game of Thrones, if that's porn or not. That was episode 6. If you want to check it out, feel free to chime in on that on the mailbag, and I will open that up next episode. The email address is podcast@beyondthebattle.net. But if you want to give Matthew any feedback, I'll pass that along to him. You can email that in as well to podcast@beyondthebattle.net. What I can't do, I can get rid of the mailbag for this episode. That's fine. What I can't do is get rid of Noah's rant, because I know that the large multitude of international listeners that we have, every single one of you will complain and boycott, and frankly, you may not be able to go on. You've listened to the flip side only to get to Noah's rant and to think that we would have an episode that didn't have Noah's rant. I know that you may not be able to get through your day, and I respect that, and I know what that's like, and I don't want to have to hear the hate mail. And so, without further ado, and now for the most awkward transition in all of podcasting, it is time for complete shenanigans, Noah's rant.
Noah's rant.
Okay, so it's time for Noah's rant. I don't know what this is like for women. Not usually a good way to start a segment. But bear with me. I don't know what it's like for women, because I don't go to women's restrooms. But for men, there are a whole lot of men who do not wash their hands after going to the bathroom. Now, you might be thinking, if you're a guy, I don't know what you're thinking if you're a guy, okay? But you need to listen. You might be thinking, well, we'll just call it number 1 and number 2. This is a family-friendly show. Sometimes we push the envelope a little bit. Well, a lot of it. You probably should not let your children listen to Noah's rant. Well, all of the Flip Side podcast. But we'll call it number 1 and number 2, right? Just in case. We want to keep it clean. Some of you are thinking, well, if I just go number 1, I don't have to wash my hands. Yes, you do. First of all, let's just get that out of the way. Yes, you do. Now as I'm ranting, it's hard for me in this delusional rant stage I'm in, with the adrenaline pumping and the energy and passion flowing, to know what I should or shouldn't say. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it like this. You know that there's sweat down there, and it does not smell good, okay? And number 1 is number 1, and you need to wash your hands after you go number 1 every single time. But This rant is not reserved for you disgusting individuals that don't wash your hands after going number one. I am talking about the men who go into the stall, who tear it up, who have destroyed that stall, who have destroyed the entire vicinity of the bathroom, ground zero. They walk out of the stall with no shame. I'm at the sink washing my hands, as if to demonstrate to them, hey, fella, did you know that this sink was here to put your hands under the flowing water and put it under the sudsy soap and rub it together, and you could even sing the ABC song in your head while you're doing it, and then when you're done, dry your hands off and depart? That's what this sink is here for. It is not just a place to put the box of tissues. And that fellow walks right out, doesn't even look in my direction, puts his number 2 stained hand right on the doorknob or handle, opens the door, and proceeds to go out into the real world. The real world that you and I occupy. Yeah. The real world that you and I push the same buttons on the ATM that fella pushes. The real world where you and I push the same screens at the gas station that fella pushes. The real world where we touch the same tongs at the buffet and salad bar that number 2 stained handed fella touched. Disgusting. You are disgusting, fella. You are disgusting. You need to wash your hands after you go to the bathroom. Do you really think that little tiny piece of half of a millimeter thick toilet paper is going to protect your hand from your number 2? Let alone the fact that you are then putting food into that hand and putting it into your mouth. Do you know that is like licking your own number 2? I must stop now. Noah's Rant is an important, essential part of our society. Now that we've been over this, now men will wash their hands. Now you can use the ATM and not have to bathe afterwards because of Noah's Rant. The world is a better place. You are welcome. This is the end of episode 7 of the Flipside Podcast. Many thanks to Matthew Thornton for being interviewed, and man, great to catch up with him. Encourage you, if you enjoy this episode, would you share it? I would sure love that if you shared it. It would warm my heart. It would warm my toes on a cold day if you shared this episode and subscribed, and while you're at it, just leave a review and tell the world that you think The Flip Side is a 2 out of 5 podcast. Until next time, I will see you on the flip side.
The Flip Side with Noah Filipiak is a South Francis Press production. Copyright Noah Filipiak. www.noahfilipiak.com. Theme music by Kyle Lake at K-Lake Music. Used with permission. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or wherever podcasts are found.
Souls needing revivals, wonder what I do. Influence like the cup full of that Bombay. Kelly's to them Tom Hanks, Lexus to them Andres. Hoping they check it, my inner reverence, stressing for leverage. That they see the king's tracks on the pavement leading to heaven. Yow, dripping in that gold that don't perish. People selling fake, see the green around their belly. Taking refuge in his hand, see his palms, my living quarters. Close them when I'm finished, then it's time to bring me closer. There's no purgatory, cause you're in or you're out. When you see him in the clouds, then you know it's going down. Raise them. They've been sleeping for some ages. Now all God's babies so confused by this hatred. Pulpit preachers shouldn't aim to be A-list. Money probably long, but short is what your days. Have you ever heard the sound of freedom? So why the beauty pageants and caught up in emotions and following your passions? Talking that freedom, our people need them more than that Easter or coffee shop discussions, debating over baristas. Please, sir, this is why we inked up. Even when they do the autopsy, they still see him. Freedom, freedom, freedom coming quickly. Bars from the spirit, put it through the preamp and mix it like a chemist. Put it in the airwaves and hoping that they hear it. If there's some confusion, then I hope you see him clearly. Raise them, raise them, raise them. They've been sleeping for some ages. Now all God's babies so confused by this hatred. Pulpit preachers shouldn't aim to be A-list. Money probably long, but sure it's what your days is.